Okay, on Sunday you had part one of Cosmic Dance, which was your potted history of the Collet House and the dervishes and where it all came from and why it's here. And if you want to hear it again or you missed it, you can listen to it on Facebook. I put it on several groups, the Whirling Dervishes of West London, the group and the page, and our own private Turners group, and my Philosophy of a Cosmic Dance group. So several places. Eventually I'll get it on YouTube as well. So this one I'm recording as well. And with this meeting I'm going to make inroads on the teaching which lies behind the Mevlevi tradition and all other mystical traditions. And trying to verbalize it has certain pitfalls because it is really a non-verbal teaching and it's beyond rational explanation. So anything I say about it will just be a metaphor. So don't take it as the reality and don't believe anything I say at all, because ultimately you'll find your own formulation of it. But I'll give you certain pointers and certain metaphors, and from that each person puts together their own path and their own understanding. And the teaching is just so simple, it's so devastatingly simple that it's very easy to miss it, because you sort of think it can't be that's just too obvious. But it's that obvious and that simple, and it's so simple you'll probably miss it and want it to be something really complicated and obscure and esoteric, and it isn't. So if I was to sum it up in one sentence, I would say everything is consciousness, everything is the dance. So if you get that, then you can go home. That for me encapsulates the whole teaching. And the macabre, which you're learning, is also a symbol of the whole teaching. It's like a great sort of book laid out, and in dancing it, you're dancing this journey and this teaching. And there's one or two quotations which, to start off with, I quite like, because for me they encapsulate the teaching. And the first one is by a Persian called Sayyid Nizamoglu, who is from the 16th century, and he wrote, "I cannot say who it is I am amazed, I am amazed. I cannot call this self myself, I am amazed, I am amazed. Who is in my eyes seeing? Who is in my heart enduring? Who is inhaling and exhaling? I am amazed, I am amazed. Who is speaking with my tongue? Who is listening with my ears? Who is understanding with my mind? I am amazed, I am amazed. Who is stepping with these feet? Who is tasting with my mouth? Who is chewing and who swallowing? I am amazed, I am amazed. Who holds these riches in his hand? Who is the one throwing them away? Who is buying and who selling? I am amazed, I am amazed. Why is there life coursing below my skin? Why are my eyes bloodshot from crying? Why this religion? Why this faith? I am amazed, I am amazed. O Sayyid Nizamoglu, hear this. Everything comes from the One. Abandon yourself to this mighty beauty. I am amazed, I am amazed." And then the same thing being said by an Indian teacher who, from the 8th century, who was called Padmasambhava, and he was attributed with introducing Buddhism into Tibet, where he's also known as Guru Rinpoche. And this is just an extract from something he wrote. This self-originated clear light, eternally unborn, is a parentless babe of wisdom. Wondrous is this. Being non-created, it is natural wisdom. Wondrous is this. Not having known birth, it knows not death. Wondrous is this. Although it is total reality, there is no perceiver of it. Wondrous is this. Although wandering in the samsara, it remains undefiled by evil. Wondrous is this. Although seeing the Buddha, it remains unallied to good. Wondrous is this. Although possessed by all beings, it is not recognized. Wondrous is this. Those not knowing the fruit of this yoga seek other fruit. Wondrous is this. Although the clear light of reality shines within one's own mind, the multitude look for it elsewhere. Wondrous is this. What I love about both of those is that not knowing about it is also part of the wonder. So it's like in the dance of manifestation, the ignorance of the reality is a part of the dance. It's not a mistake. So with this, it's like as if there's this great sort of underground river that runs down through history, and it keeps sort of bubbling up, exact same teaching in all different times and different countries. And it's almost like there are all these different wells that go down into this great ocean. And so you have a Zen Buddhist well, and a Sufi well, and a Christian well, and a Advaita well, and a Hindu well, and a Zen well, and a Taoist well. And there are so many wells. There are as many wells as there are different people. And when you go down a particular well and you realize the great ocean at the bottom of it, then you understand the metaphors of all the other different wells. So if you go down a Sufi well and you access the great stillness and the great ocean, then you'll automatically see all the other traditions. If you pick up the Bible and read it, or the Quran, you'll all find they're all just saying exactly the same thing, but just using different metaphors. But as I said, ultimately each person finds their own way to the great ocean. So it's almost like each person's life is a unique course of yoga for you to access the great stillness. It's so devastatingly well designed. All these different things will happen in your life. Sometimes you'll be blissfully happy, and sometimes you'll be miserable. And all of it is part of this, what I call the pathless path, which is just this great dance, which ultimately you access this great stillness, which is your true nature. And normally this teaching is referred to as non-dualism. In the different traditions, different people give it different names, like Advaita and other things. But as I said, it's difficult to explain because it goes right beyond the rational thinking mind. So all these ideas I'll mention are just pointers and metaphors or springboards to your own understanding. And when you turn in the macabre, you gradually come to understand it in a non-verbal way, and in a way which is suited to you. So non-dualism, that implies there's not two, which implies that there's just one. So it's like everything is one. There's just one consciousness, which includes everything. And there are several different metaphors I can use to explain that. And there's one which both Rumi and the American philosopher Ken Wilber use. And they say it's as if there's the one mind, which is one completely one and undifferentiated oneness. And just being the oneness with no other, it gets a bit boring. So Ken Wilber uses the metaphor, he says it's no fun having dinner alone. So the great oneness wants to manifest as a creation in time and space, so there can be a dance, because that's more fun than not having a dance. So it's as if you're playing a game of checkers and there's only one of you. And so here's the board, and you're sitting as the great oneness on this side of the board, and you make your move, and then as there's only one of you, you've got to run round the other side of the board quickly and then play the opposing piece, so you then have to make the other move. But as it's only you who's there and there are no others, when you go around the other side of the board, if you make your move remembering who you really are, there's no game, there's no drama. So when you go around the other side of the board, you can only make the move in the game of checkers with complete forgetfulness of who you really are. So you have to, in order for there to be a game or a dance, when you go around the other side of the board, you have to forget your true identity and experience yourself as separate and other. And then you can make your move in the game of checkers, and then you can come back round this side of the board and make your other move, and then the game, a real game, happens. So using that metaphor, all of us are the one consciousness playing the vast cosmic game of checkers, but in complete forgetfulness of our true nature. If we knew right from the start that we were the one mind and that we contained the whole universe within us, then there wouldn't be this drama and this dance. So in the world of manifestation, when we're born into life, we forget our true identity and we start to experience ourselves as separate and divided. And that's how the dance of life continues, because then we all sort of fall in love and we squabble and life goes on in that way. But at a certain point you start to remember that you actually aren't a little separate entity, you're actually the one mind, and the whole of creation exists within you. So that's a very nice metaphor that I like, that both Rumi and Ken Wilber use to explain why there is a creation and why we all appear separate and why there's a dance of manifestation. And then there's another amazing Rumi story from the Masnavi, which is a great epic poem that he wrote. And this story is about a man who lived in Baghdad. And the man from Baghdad kept having this recurring dream that there was a great treasure hidden in a particular house in Cairo. And he had the dream so often, but eventually he decided to leave Baghdad and set off on a journey to Cairo to see if he could find the house that he dreamt about, which contained the great treasure. And so off he went, and on the way to Cairo he had all these adventures and traumas and ordeals and things. But after a while, eventually he arrives in Cairo, and when he gets into the big city, he meets a man on the street, and he tells the man about his dream, how he's dreamt there's this treasure in a house in Cairo. And the man from Cairo says, well, that's a bit of a coincidence, because I keep having this recurring dream that there's a great treasure hidden in this particular house in Baghdad. And he describes the house, and the man from Baghdad realizes that it's his own house which is being described. So he goes back to Baghdad and digs in the basement, and there, sure enough, is the treasure he was looking for. And it was always in his own house right from the start. But in order to discover the great treasure, he had to go off and have all these great adventures before he realised that he actually had it and was it already. So that's like another metaphor for the dance of life and the journey of creation. All of us already are the one consciousness. What's looking out through your eyes right now is the one mind, but we perceive ourselves as separate and divided. So we go off and have this great circular journey of life, which I've drawn as a simple diagram here, which also relates to the turning circle in the Macabele, which fairly soon you'll be turning around. So it's like all of us are the one mind, all of us have this amazing treasure in us, all of us have and are exactly what we're searching for, but as part of the drama of creation we have to go off into life and have this great long adventure which goes on for 80 or 90 years often, and then eventually we start to realise that what we're actually looking for is what we already are. And Rumi uses the metaphor of the fish in the sea who has heard about this stuff called water, and then he went swimming off to see if he could find water. So it's a bit like that.
What does that mean, outflow?
It's a sort of metaphorical word. Outflow. It's, in some traditions they have, and in the Mevlevi tradition, and in the Taoist tradition as well, the one consciousness in Taoism manifests as the 10,000 things, they say. So that means oneness manifests as multiplicity. So it's sometimes called the outflowing from the one mind into a manifest creation of multiplicity. And then it's sometimes called return to source when it gets absorbed back into the oneness. So in your life, when you're born, you come out of the great oneness, and then you suddenly experience yourself in the world of multiplicity, with all these multiple things around you. And then later on in life, probably you'll start to absorb back into the great oneness, and separation disappears. Any sort of questions on that basic concept of non-dualism? It's such a simple idea. It's like all of us are oneness dancing. We think we're multiple and separate.
What about supernatural things?
What about them?
Are they also like oneness, thinking that they're supernatural?
From this point of view, everything is oneness, so that would include what you might call supernatural. You'd have to give me examples of something supernatural that you've actually experienced.
I haven't.
No. Wait till you've experienced it.
I heard Moody talk about this the other day, and he says something along the lines that the point is not what you're perceiving, it's where you're looking from. So whether you're looking at something which is manifest or unmanifest, supernatural, corporeal, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing looking out at whatever you're perceiving. That's a summary of Moody. I'm not Moody, but it was something like that.
Okay. Cool.
Okay, I'll give you another metaphor. All of this is preparing the ground for when we explain the ceremony, and this is like more sort of like the ground rules. And some teachers describe the process of the dance and the process of this circular journey as going in indefinite stages. And I've drawn it as a diagram here. And at birth and before birth, and when you're a very young baby, psychologists tell us that the young baby doesn't differentiate between self and other. So it's like there's just a total unity. So siblings and parents and world aren't experienced as something separate. So I've called that I am everything, or the pre-rational unity of the baby. And then as you start to grow up and you start to develop a separate sense of self, then gradually you start to differentiate between self and other. So you start to realise that your siblings aren't you, they're separate, and your parents are separate, and your school friends are separate, and the outer world, your sort of body ends here, and then there's self and other. And that one I've called I am something. And being an I am something is necessary for your particular dance in the great drama of life. If we just stayed in the state of total unity, there's no dance and there's no drama. Once we start to experience ourselves as separate, then, as I said, we interact with other apparently separate entities, and we start to fall in love, and we squabble, and we fight, and the drama goes on like that. The downside of being an I am something is that you also then get in a cycle of both pleasure and pain. So when the external world goes in a way which is agreeable to you, then you start to feel happy. And when the external world goes in a way which is disagreeable, then you feel very unhappy. So it's like you're in this cycle. And eventually, as life goes on for most people, the cycle of pleasure and pain gets a bit tiresome. And often it's like you've got this memory at the back of your mind of the pre-rational unified state. And Rumi often describes that in his poetry, and he uses the simile of the ney flute playing plaintively, which is the crying or remembering of this underlying unity. So it's like there's something right at the back of your mind, there's this deep memory of something else, of a unified state beyond the cycle of both pleasure and pain. And as life goes on, often you'll start to look inside yourself, because it's like when you're very young, there's something looking out from your eyes which is independent of everything which is going on around you. And as you grow up, when you get a bit older and your interests change, and still there's the same thing looking out. It's almost like it just observes without comment what's going on. So your psyche and your body is changing all the time, and yet if you sort of observe yourself, you'll see there's something aware of your thinking and your feeling. And this awareness doesn't change, it always remains exactly the same. And it's exactly the same when you're 60, when you're 62, and I guess it's probably exactly the same when you're 80 and when you're 90. But it's always there, and it gets overlooked because we identify with what is seen rather than what is doing the seeing. So we tend to identify with what you could call the mind-body mechanism. And in the I am something, the I am something latches on to all sorts of different things in our lives. So when you're a school child, you sort of say, I'm at school, and so on and so forth. And then you get older and you might get married and you might have a great career and you might have a very important job, and then you get some great job title and you identify with that. So you might say, I'm a managing director, or whatever your particular role is. So there's, at that level, there's all these different identities in time that we identify with. And often, at times of bereavement or redundancy, you lose, suddenly that identity falls away, maybe briefly. Particularly in redundancy, you had this great job title, which you identified through, and then suddenly overnight it just disappears, and there's almost like an emptiness or a bereavement. So those I am something identities will come and go through life, and then often in life we fight with people, because you might say, one person says I'm a Republican, another person says I'm a Democrat. We all know what that leads to. So life goes on like that with the I am identities. But when you get, eventually that sort of, you get tired of that cycle and you have this memory of the unity, which is always there in the background. Because it feels like something you've lost, you project the longing for it onto all your various life goals. So it's like you think, if I had lots of possessions, then I'd have this deep contentment. And you get the possessions, possibly, but then, and even for a little while, you're contented. And then the longing arises again. Then you think, if I had the perfect partner and the huge great house by the river, then I'd be perfectly content. And if you're lucky enough to get that, still there's that thing missing. There's the longing. So eventually, normally you start to look inwards at a certain point. And when you first look inwards, if you do practice deep meditation or even dervish turning or whatever your particular method is, it's like you had thought you were a separate entity, and you look in and it's almost like there's nothing there at all. It's just an empty space. And I've called that the state of I am nothing. And in Buddhism they call that sunyata, or voidness. And you go into it at deep sleep at night, and it's a fantastic place to be, because there's absolutely nothing. There's no space, there's no time, there's no trauma, there's no you, there's no other. And it's an amazing space to be, but it's still a transitional space. And if you stop there, you can end up with quite a nihilistic view of creation and yourself, because you come out with nothing has any purpose and nothing has any value. So don't stop there. I think a number of modern Neo-Advaita teachers sometimes get stuck around there, and it can become a very harsh teaching. What normally happens is you go through that and you notice it's not that you're nothing, you are actually everything, and everything you're previously perceived as external, you start to realise is actually taking place within you. So it's like you contain everything. And I've called that everything exists within me, empathetic unity. With the original pre-rational baby unity, it wasn't that empathetic, because babies don't really consider everyone around them and I think I won't cry tonight because you need a good night's sleep. But with the I am everything, it's totally empathetic and full of compassion. So it's like everything exists within you and you treat everything in the same way. So that's a basic knockdown of the circular journey, which again, as we'll discover later, is the dance of the macabre. But the whole point is really you're not attaining anything. It's more like layers of mistaken identity fall away. And even the layers of mistaken identity aren't a mistake. They're all a part of the drama, and how the drama and the dance is meant to be. And here's a couple more little quotes for you. The great way is without limit, fathomless and subtle, beyond comprehension, beyond words. The Confucian scholar Chao Tuni asked the Zen master Kinsan Butsuin what ultimate truth was. Butsuin replied, "You see those blue mountains over there? Nobody prevents your seeing." Chao Tun did not quite understand and hesitated, but Butsuin burst out laughing. At that, Chao Tun attained insight. Nothing prevents your seeing. There's nothing in the way. And this is how Rumi puts it. This is how Rumi, I think, describes non-dualism in the Masnavi. Once more we come back to the tale. When indeed did we go forth from the tale? If we come to ignorance, that is his prison. And if we come to knowledge, that is his palace. And if we come to sleep, we are his intoxicated ones. And if to wakefulness, we are in his hands. And if we weep, we are a cloud laden with the bounty dispensed by him. And if we laugh, at that time we are his lightning. And if we come to wrath and war, 'tis the reflection of his might. And if to peace and forgiveness, 'tis the reflection of his love. Who are we in this tangled, complex world? What thing other than he indeed hath he, who is single like Aleph? Nothing, nothing. I'm not going to go on hardly any more because you can go home to bed now. All I'm going to say that in your process of your training, a lot of dissolving will be happening around here, because some of those identities, some of the I am somethings, are what Eckhart Tolle refers to as the pain body, where you identify with traumatic experiences in your life. And I think I mentioned it last week, but you often build a hard shell around yourself to protect yourself from future hurt. And in the process of the training, that gradually starts to dissolve. So as again I said last week, sometimes after some classes you'll feel you're never going to get it, and you'll start crying, and you'll wonder what you're doing here and can't wait to get out the door. And then the next week you'll come along and something has shifted, and at a certain point it's like you fall in love, but it's not like you're in love with just one person. It's almost like your heart has become transparent, like a clear glass, and the light just flows through you. So it's like you become transparent. So in your journeys on this particular training, don't despair, and if you need to cry, cry, but at other times this great happiness will come flowing out of you. And we're all here to support and encourage each other in the process. And next Tuesday I'll tell you a bit more. Anything else you can think of? In which case we'll go home. Oh.
Question. How do we know that we're residing in the I am nothing? I understand how we know that we're shedding the I am something, because we would feel emotional, but how do we know we're not kind of stuck in the...
When you're in I am nothing, you don't know anything about it. In some traditions, Indian traditions, it's described as samadhi, and it really is like a conscious experience of deep sleep. In the deep sleep state, there's no time, no experience, no nothing. And in deep meditation, it's almost like you transcend at a certain point, and in turning as well, you'll sometimes transcend. It's almost like you disappear as a separate entity. But the thing to be careful of at that point is that it doesn't become a closed, separate thing. So at a certain point it goes through, it's like you go right through it, and then it encompasses everything. So it's like a transitional state. Don't worry. But the most amazing thing is, as I said at the beginning, that the thing we're looking for, if we are looking for something, was never lost. So it's like the man from Baghdad. It's what's already is looking out through your eyes. It's both the seer and the seen. But we're in this drama of life, so the forgetting that and the moving away from it is part of the dance. It's why we go on and have this great dance of creation. What I've observed from having lived quite a bit of my particular dance now, and looking back on it, is when I was at different times in my life, it was very frightening, and but then always later on I look back and I thought, no, that was absolutely perfect. It was so well arranged. Why did I worry? I needn't have worried, because it all resolves itself, and you suddenly see the purpose of why a particular thing happened further along. So from my own perspective, it's like I'm just experiencing this immaculately produced movie film, which at times is full of beauty and at times is full of terror, but it's like it's also something else, and you see it from a completely different perspective. So that, when you see that enough, it then gives you this feeling of what Helen goes on about, is the need to surrender. Once you understand that it's all the dance of oneness, then you can let yourself, you're no longer so frightened of it and trying to ward it off and protect yourself. You can let the dance unfold. And then it seems, I think, becomes a happier dance. And then it's like you discover I think Ken Wilber uses the words, "You discover a new duty in consciousness," was his phrase. And it's like everyone has this unique talent to manifest in the great drama of life. And then it really does become a fun dance once you're really fully dancing your dance. And then you inspire other people to dance their dance. But all the things in life, and that includes illness and bereavement, are all a part of that dance. So more next week. Oh.
You mentioned about the transparency of the heart, which at some stage we can expect to get. In terms of the timetable for that, I'm assuming it doesn't have to be by the end of this training, right?
Everyone's different.
I know, that's what I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a common experience, like, or if it happens further down the line.
You'll get incentive bonuses, definitely. We call the process in the training, we call it cooking. So you're a chickpea being cooked, and you're being cooked so you sort of soften, so your hard edges which you may have built up, get dissolved. So that's the sort of Rumi Mevlevi metaphor as being cooked in a cooking pot. And Helen comes along and hits you with a ladle to soften you. And the falling in love process for some people will happen in the training. If it doesn't happen fully, I'm pretty sure you're going to get major glimpses of it. But your training doesn't end at the end of your training. Mr. Rezui said it takes 7 years before you can call yourself a turner. So it's a 7-year initial process. And then it goes on. If you find this is a method that appeals to you, it may not ultimately appeal to you. Your main method may be something completely different, because no one knows what's right for you but you, and your life will unfold like that. But if this method, you love it and you want it to be part of your particular path, then you'll go down that process in a way which is suitable to you as an individual. But definitely my experience is you get these massive incentive bonuses just when you think, as I said, I'm never going to get this, I'm the worst turner there's ever been. Suddenly this great happiness descends on you, and then you go away glowing for several days. I don't know how it works. It's almost like the macabre for me, having witnessed it for some time. It's sort of like a magic thing. I think in Sufism they call it the power of ritual, or the power of baraka, I think they call it.
Baraka?
I think so. I'm not a great expert, but I think that's what they call it. And it's like the thing becomes a vehicle for some sort of bigger force. And when we have our macabre, particularly the guest ones, I'll often come in here, and about an hour before the ceremony, it's like something has just come down and descending on everything, and it's like it's just fit with love. I can't explain that at all, but I've experienced it many times. And it also happens when one of our long-term turners dies. If you can have their memorial ceremony, as we do the very next Friday, it's just like something blows into it which I can't explain. So I can't explain much at all, actually, but but something happens and you'll experience it. Lila.
There are things that when certain things start to come up, and they're difficult, there is a sort of tendency to go into not I am something, to just foggy, sort of runaway place.
Mm.
And it's like thinking when it happens in turning, it's I experience it as thinking or wanting to go away. So it's a
No, it's a very good question. I think you've got an answer for that.
Well, I know that something's going on, and I can see it, and it's just part of a process that you have to go through, and it's almost like for you something's coming out, and it's that you have from what I can perceive is you have fear around it, which is clouding your thought process, and from what I see, there's an emotion there, and I can see it in your body language and how you're moving. So it's I think it'll. Well, we both know it's a process, and I'm a witness to that, and we will go through this process together. And I think a lot of fear comes up in trainings, and in my own training, I would say a lot of fear came up, because underneath my fear, when I go back to that time, there was a lot of suffering. And my own training, for those of you, my own training was very difficult, and when we say about being cooked, I thought, oh my God, I mean, I cried all the way through the second half of my training, and I thought my teacher was just basically churning me into hummus. And it really felt like that, and it was very, very painful, but I trusted him, and I think that's the big thing, was I really trusted him, and I really trusted those other people that were supporting the training, that allowed me to go through the process, because I can tell you there were many, many times when I just wanted to run away, and I just thought by the end of the training I was going to be out of here the minute it ended. But as Philip said, it's at some points towards the end of that training, it was like I fell in love, literally, and because it becomes so emotional, and there's something about the posture, and the whole posture literally opens your heart. And in that heart opening, it was like I just fell in love, and it was like I felt that the people that supported me in that training, it was like I was just being so held. So the more I opened, it was everything else opened with me. And what I hadn't realised was how unhappy I had been, because within a year of turning, I completely changed, and I was really happy. And that was my touchstone, was turning actually made me very happy. And that was my experience. So I stayed, and I just carried on turning. Despite the first year is the most difficult, because I was very frightened often, especially in guest macabre-lays. Because when I did my graduation macabre, I don't think my feet touched the floor. I was like, ugh. But I carried on doing it, and then at some point, I didn't want to not turn. I just kept turning, and it basically changed my life. It was almost like my old life died away. It's like we were shedding layers. Something just fell away, and I just got a new life. It was like being born again, you could say. It was almost like a birth. But you have to trust the process. And I know it's not easy.
The question, do you both feel that I am everything?
Which end? Top and bottom?
Is an experience that you recognise.
What happened once, and it did happen term, was I disappeared. It's like Helen didn't exist anymore. And the only way I kind of had that experience is as I came back. But at some point in that experience, what happened was, I just wasn't there anymore. And then suddenly I was, and something fell away. It was like disappearing into the dance.
It's sort of like you aren't a separate thing
Yeah.
acting on the dance. It's like the whole thing is just going on as part of one whole, which you are. So it is no longer like you're this separate thing trying to manipulate it. If that makes sense.
But what happens is we will go through it in the symbolism of the ceremony. But there's the calligraphy that we bow to. Yah Hasreti Mevlana, may God keep his secrets. So you've seen the Macabre, and we bow into that, and when we leave the room we bow out, and it's all. There is a secret within the turning that it's almost like it's embeds itself into your heart. You don't find yourself talking about it, but it's almost like that kind of, it radiates out into your life, so the whole thing just starts to permeate everything into your life. So, I don't know if that's a good explanation, but it expands, if that's the right word. It just seems to, the whole thing expands. So it just, yeah.
Can I just say something from my experience? It's like when you want to sneeze, you don't make it musical. It's just sneezing. Or when there's something natural happening to your body, you should really let it happen naturally. You don't make it unnatural. It's a stupid example for turning, but when the feelings are coming out naturally, you should not dramatize it or make it different to what you think should be. But let just the sneezing happen. Let the dance or turning do what it needs to do to you. Otherwise, it might take longer, or you may not feel the effect, or before you feel it, you leave it. But if you just let it happen naturally, even don't be scared of what's going to happen. Like, worst come to worst is like when you asked me not to turn for a while, because I just let whatever was happening to me happen. Even if you stopped me turning for a while, it was good for me, because it showed me how to control the joy in a certain way, that not to enter other people's space. So it was my experience. I thought everything coming from your inside, you should just let it happen.
Great, thank you. When you look up at the Milky Way, Gita, stretching vastly from horizon to horizon, you'll find that where you experience it is in exactly the same place as where you experience your thoughts and your feelings. So it's actually already taking place inside you. We just think it's external. If you examine your experience, it's actually already taking place within you. Shall we carry on next week? Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.